Well, we have created these two queues, and we know that we are kind of information we need to write that the producer and the consumer needs to be consumed. And like I said, this information needs to be exact and needs to respect a contract agreement. So how this information would look like? Well, I actually have a bunch of options. And for this case, I'm just gonna use on a website, json.org/example.com. And you have many examples. For instance, we're gonna use JSON, but JSON is not the only way, the protocol type. Basically, it's a text representation and it comes from JavaScript object notation, as you can see here. And it's not necessarily specific to the JavaScript. By the way, JavaScript is the language that every browser is using. So this is a way how you put objects. In this case, it's about glossary. As you can see, this is a property, and inside the property, there is specific to the object. Each JSON object, it starts with a parenthesis, and then you're gonna specify the properties, and you have a properties that can contain another object. Now I'm gonna tell you just in a moment. However, if you want, you can use XML as well, and basically any format you can put in that queues. But we're gonna use JSON, and I'm gonna tell you why. So first, we're gonna use JSON because, as you know, we're gonna edit this queue. We can specify a schema definition. Even UiPath, it will not force you the kind of information you're putting here. It's somehow recommended to use JSON because it's very widespread. It's a modern protocol, and you have these implemented things like the schema definitions. So our information would look something like this. Now in practice, you don't have these leading spaces. Actually, these leading spaces are just to make it look prettier and to be more easy to be read. Now, if we take this example from W3 Schools, you have this in one single line, and this is still a valid JSON object. Now, how do you convert this to something which is more easy, where you can say here JSON pretty print. So this one is jsonformatter.org. I'm going to open in a new tab, and in this space, I'm going to just paste here, and it will format for me. This is actually a website which I'm using all the time. So if I'm going to delete these leading zeros, this will be still valid. So let's add another properties. Let's say test, and this test, it will be another object. So I'm going to create another object with a property which will be property, I don't know, let's say another age, and that will be 31, and press enter. Oh, sorry, I pressed the print from mistake. I have defined another object, which this one is named test, and I have a single property 31. And you don't have any limit how many properties you need to create here, okay? Now, what's interesting about this JSON is that first, this is a prerequisite to start with the curly bracket and to end with a curly bracket. As you can see here, this is a type you define an object. Now, you need to use the double quotation marks in order to specify a property, and this is mandatory. You have two types of values. You have a string and a number. The date, if you want to say any kind of date, it needs to be converted to a text. Okay, so this you need to keep in mind. And you can have as many nested objects. This is actually a nested object. And you don't have a limit to the objects that you're gonna specify from here. So you can have another object here, this age, it can be another object, and so on and so forth. Great, so this is pretty much all about how you use JSON, how you format, and why we would use JSON in this case. Now let's go to the next part.